of England and East Kent. But otherwise, a lot of dry, bright weather with some sunshine. A touch milder than today, still below average, still feeling pretty chilly, but the winds perhaps not quite as strong as they have been today either. We'll see a bit more wet weather coming into Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland during the evening. That'll have some snow over the hills, and we'll still have some snow mixed in as it heads southwards across Wales during the early hours of Saturday morning. That'll bring a showery start to the weekend across South Wales, southwest England, with some snow over the mountains and the moors. Still one or two scattered showers across the east, but otherwise a lot of dry, bright weather across the country this weekend. It's going to stay on the chilly side, yes. There will still be a few showers here and there, but many places will see some sunny spells. But do watch out for some icy conditions overnight tonight.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry and this is Dewbs & Co, the show where we'll get into some of the things that have got you talking today. And the head of GCHQ has warned that we're experiencing a period of generational upheaval. He's warned that democratic nations are facing a moment of reckoning. Are we? And what should be done about it? And over 2 million people in England and Wales experienced domestic abuse last year. Priti Patel has launched a new Tackling a Domestic Abuse plan to try and stop it. It includes things like putting perpetrators on a register. Well, personally, I'd make them all have a tattoo so we could spot them a mile off and avoid them. But that's just me. We'll be looking at the plan and whether it will indeed rid society of the cancer of domestic abuse. And over in Scotland, in a massive reform to the justice system, teenagers who commit crimes will no longer be sent to young offenders institutes. Instead, they'll be dealt with using approaches of love and support. I can just imagine myself hugging one right now. Can you? And following the change at Disneyland to stop greeting visitors as boys and girls, a boss there has revealed that at least half of future characters will be LGBTQIA+ or other minorities. Does the sexuality of Disney characters really matter? All of that to come, but first, the latest news headlines.
Michelle, thank you. Just after 6 o'clock, the headlines. Germany's Vice-Chancellor has activated emergency plans in case Russia halts its gas supply to Europe. That comes after the Russian President Vladimir Putin signed a decree to stop its supply of gas from tomorrow unless contracts are paid in Russia's currency, the ruble. Western countries have rejected the move as a breach of contract set out in euros and dollars. Germany and France have described the move as blackmail. Downing Street says it's monitoring the situation, but has also highlighted the UK is much less reliant on Russia for its gas than its European counterparts. Meanwhile, the UK's announced 14 additional sanctions against Russian interests, with the broadcaster RT among those targeted for spreading propaganda. The Defence Secretary has also announced more lethal aid will be sent to Ukraine. And that comes after that standing ovation for Ukraine's president, who called for tougher sanctions against Moscow. Volodymyr Zelensky receiving that ovation as he addressed the Belgian, Dutch and Australian delegates. He asked for further sanctions, weapons and help in obtaining EU membership for his country. He also told delegates Russia poses a nuclear threat to the world.
The Russian aggression, what is destroying the lives of people, has become a real threat to your country and to your people as well. They are openly discussing the possibility of using nuclear weapons against those who don't want to subdue.
Volodymyr Zelensky there. Well, NATO's Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg has said there's no evidence Russia is scaling back its troops. Officials in Chernobyl had said Russian troops were heading for the Belarusian border, but to regroup, not retreat. This comes as the Ukrainian Interior Ministry says Russia's also withdrawing forces in the Kyiv region. But Ukraine's former president, Petro Poroshenko, who's in Kyiv, told GB News the capital is still being bombarded.
We have shelling, artillery shelling, multi-rocket launch shelling, and just besides me, we have a residential building which was attacked by cruise missiles of Russia. They attack us permanently. The last cruise missiles was happening just 50 minutes ago.
Petro Poroshenko there. And in a rare public address, Britain's spy chief has said Vladimir Putin's advisers are just scared to tell him the truth about the progress of his Ukraine invasion. Speaking in Australia, Sir Jeremy Fleming told the audience the Russian president has massively misjudged the resistance of the Ukrainian people and he overestimated the capabilities of his military forces to secure victory.
We've seen Russian soldiers, short of weapons and morale, refusing to carry out orders, sabotaging their own equipment, and even accidentally shooting down their own aircraft. And even though we believe Putin's advisers are afraid to tell him the truth, what's going on and the extent of these misjudgments must be crystal clear to the regime.
Sir Jeremy Fleming. Here, a deadline to cap the UK's only shale gas wells has been extended, with regulators telling fracking firm Quadrilla it now has until the end of June next year. The decision comes ahead of the government's delayed energy strategy. The company welcomed the move, saying it would have been absurd to pour concrete down wells during an energy crisis. And Labour has launched its local election campaign in Bury in Greater Manchester, with Sir Keir Starmer pledging to cut energy bills by up to £600 per household. The party's warning that households can be expected to pay more than £2,500 more due to the cost of living crisis. The Labour leader said the public deserves better than what he called a pathetic response from the government. And firefighters are scaling down what they're calling a large fire at a business park in Stretton in Derbyshire. Staffordshire Fire and Rescue say the blaze, which they say covered an area of 30 square metres, is now under control. Firefighters are expected to remain at the scene overnight tonight, and nearby roads are closed, with residents being asked to keep inside, keeping doors and windows closed. No casualties have been reported. Lastly, the Royal Mail is modernising and it's phasing out its traditional first and second class stamps, replacing them instead with newer barcode labelling. It's all part of a modernisation drive said to add security features, with customers being able to interact online, scanning barcodes on the Royal Mail app. Normal stamps will still be valid until February next year, after which customers can swap them for the new versions. On TV, online and on your radio via DAB+, you're with GB News. Now more from Michelle and Dewbs & Co.
Thanks, Polly. Well, keeping me company tonight till 7 o'clock. My panel, William Clouston, the leader of the Social Democratic Party, Joanna Williams, author and academic, and Kevin Craig, the Labour councillor and CEO of PLMR. And you know the drill on Dewbs & Co by now. It's not just about us here, it's about you at home as well and your thoughts. What is on your mind tonight? You can drop me an email, gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can tweet me at Michelle Dewbs or at GBNews. Don't forget, of course, if you haven't already, you can subscribe to our YouTube page. All the best bits are on there, which means obviously Dewbs & Co. We've got an app. Have you got that? Yes, I use that. I like it. We're on the radio, DAB+, and we're all over social media. TikTok as well. I'm going to have to start using that one of these days. I don't think I'm trendy enough, but I promise I'm going to try it one of these days, just not today. But if you're on there, you can search GB News, and we are indeed there as well. Right, our top story during a speech in Australia this morning, the director of GCHQ, that's a mouthful, said Jeremy Fleming has warned that the world faces a period of generational upheaval in the face of Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the rise of China. He says the pandemic, the profile and dominance of technology and cyber, the role of China, the end of the Afghan campaign, and now Putin's invasion of Ukraine. Any one of these could be viewed as a historic shift, but taken together, they add up to a period of generational upheaval. The economic, societal and geopolitical consequences are still playing out and will do so for decades to come. What do we reckon then, William? Are we facing a generational upheaval? Do we need to be worried?
I don't think we should be worried. I think that's not the proper reaction to it, but it's certainly an upheaval. He called it a moment of reckoning. It was a good little speech. It's worth reading. He's right that the pandemic has sort of exacerbated these things. Obviously, the Russian invasion of Ukraine is a major crisis. But the slow burn on this is the rise of China. I think these events taken together are a sea change. And I think the West, and I think Britain in particular, is strategically exposed. And I think the cause of this has been sort of 30 years, more than 30 years actually, of sort of global free trade, utopian ideology. We've neglected our own industries. We have these massive supply lines all around the world. We don't care about what's made here. And the pandemic, I think, exposed that. We were very vulnerable. And I think the cure to this is a more domestic focus and a proper industrial policy. You need to care about what is made, where and by whom, and under what conditions it's made. Yeah. So I think you'll get a shift away from a very naive sort of free trade ideology. We've had that for too long. It's not worked. I think we need to shift to a more domestic focus. I think we can do it if we roll our sleeves up.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting because everyone seems to call for kind of domestic produce and consideration of what we produce, where and how. And then on the next hand, everyone just wants the cheapest thing possible. So there's a real contradiction there. But anyway, Kevin, your thoughts?
Well, I think William's right in that we need to make more in our own country. That was one of the big conclusions from this important speech from one of our leading members of the security services. In this speech, which he delivered, Michelle, he also said something which I really can rally behind. He talked about the pandemic, the human costs, and the amazing work of the scientists and medics leaving us in a much better place. And the experience of the pandemic has helped us to learn painful lessons about national security. So I think he's right. I think it's really interesting these days that our top spooks have a much higher public profile. And I do think that the message here about the next generation needing to realise we're at a moment of massive change is true. Because a few years ago, Russia was our mate as in a combined war against aspects of terrorism. Conveniently, I would say many people from all sides in politics ignored aspects of, dirty money. And he, in this speech, is asking us to look again. But very good point by William that we need to make more for the good of our own country.
Yeah, Joanna?
Well, I think one of the main things that people have picked up on in this speech is the way he's been pointing to the weaknesses that have been exposed in Russia with the Russian army. I mean, clearly it seems that Putin expected to be able to roll into Ukraine and conquer the entire country within 48 hours, and things have clearly not gone to plan. But again, as Sir Jeremy Fleming points out in his speech, we can't afford to just relax and sit back and say, well, this has exposed the Russian weaknesses, because at the same time as it's done that, it's exposed our weaknesses in the West as well, both in terms of military weaknesses. What kind of army do we have in this country now that international politics is back on the agenda? We've let our own military budget kind of decline year on year, and perhaps we need to revisit that now. But also in terms of energy, I was pleased to see in your news report that we're not going to be concreting over the fracking wells that we've got going in this country. Doesn't mean to say we're restarting them, we're just not concreting over them.
I think that's a sensible decision right now.
Definitely. But I think all of those things we have to look at again.
Kevin, look at Kevin. What's wrong with that?
Why is everybody on this panel tonight relaxed about fracking? Come on.
Well, I'm not relaxed about fracking necessarily, nor do I think that fracking is the immediate answer to our immediate problems, because it's not an immediate switch, there you go, you've got gas. Yeah. But what I am relaxed about, excited about, encouraged about is keeping your options open.
Yes.
I think in such uncertainty, reducing your options, concreting wells is quite frankly silly.
And one thing is that I'm very, very relieved about is that unlike Germany and France, we are not quite so dependent upon Russian gas. So the Russians are now turning around and saying, we want to be paid in rubles and putting all kinds of conditions.
It's very important.
And we're lucky we're not caught up in that.
These are things which politicians 40, 50 years ago knew about. They thought about domestic security and resilience in terms of energy and food as well. These are things, as I say, we've forgotten all about. We don't think it matters. And it doesn't occur to the people that have been running our energy policy the last 20, 30 years that actually the balance of payments matter as well. If you import all your energy, you're just wrecking your balance of trade. We haven't had a balanced, in goods anyway, we haven't had a balanced surplus since the 80s.
What I would just say to the three of you, though, is that on fracking, what's happened in Ukraine is terrible, but wouldn't it be a shame if these events led us to take measures or positions that are basically bad for a planet we're trying to protect?
I agree, but if we wanted to, I agree with that. But I think, remember with fracking, we have very short-term government here. So what they're doing is reacting to something and saying we'll do that. Remember, fracking will take many, many years to come on. Nuclear will take many, many years to come on. Probably the small nuclear units they're looking at will take 10 years. This should have been done 25 years ago, but it wasn't.
Fair point.
The sooner you do it, the better. Nuclear in particular, that is the key to it. Get behind it, put your shoulder behind it, invest in it, and it'll be better for... The one thing that we've learned on the cost of living crisis is that if we'd done what the French had done and invested in nuclear properly, nuclear power, the price of that doesn't fluctuate. It's a long-term, it's a 60-year investment. It doesn't fluctuate at all. If you want secure power for your country, that's what you would do.
Well, we've talked a lot about how our nuclear power and fracking can't just be turned on and off at the flick of a switch, and I completely agree with that. But I think we've got to remember that the same is also true for climate. Us not fracking tomorrow is not going to automatically bring about a reduction in global temperatures. The climate changes over periods of hundreds of years. That's the timescale that we're looking at with climate change. And sometimes when we think about people who are going to be suffering in the very, very short term, we give the impression, or we risk giving the impression, that decisions we're making about the climate will kind of protect these people tomorrow. No. They won't. Climate change is not something that can be turned on and off with a decision made about fracking.
And we're 1% of global emissions.
Yeah, but we have to... I thought there was a general consensus that we have to start to turn around centuries of damage, centuries of overheating of the planet, and that actually, if you can go for more nuclear, hydrogen, solar, renewable wind, that's the way forward for our country.
Yeah.
And as an island nation, we're well placed.
I think that's right, but we've already, gone a long way down this road by deindustrialising, and that's I think it was a terrible error. And I think it's false because the countries that are bilging CO2 out to produce goods that we buy, we're pretending that we're doing something that we're not.
But I do find it fascinating, by the way, Kevin, because you and I have done this panel a few times now. You talk about the environment and protecting the environment and, let's not rush to make changes that might damage the environment in response to an activity such as Ukraine. But you're a massive advocate of masks, for example. Look at the things that the disposable masks, what they've been doing to the environment.
You had to save lives. There was a pandemic on, and masks were an important part of that. Before we got to the point where the population is so well vaccinated by the scientists that the head of GCHQ praised here, the amazing work. Masks, I agree with you, it was terrible. We saw them chucked away everywhere on the street, of course, but we were saving human lives at that point.
Come on, what with those flimsy disposable masks that people used to wear about 27 times, pulled out of the pocket, covered in food and all the rest.
Are we denying that masks helped reduce transmission of COVID, are we?
I will say that the way that people have used these disposable masks multiple times over, rummaging around the bottom of their bag with God only knows what stuck to them, half on their nose, half on their chin. I am not a scientist, but I would anticipate that the impact of reduction of transmission was negligible.
They're like
the way that people use those masks.
They're like wet wipes. Wet wipes. Ask anyone at Thames Water. They should be banned.
Yeah. I think the point going back to Sir Geoffrey Fleming's speech for a second there, when he talks about a generational upheaval, I think really it's about so much more than about COVID, and even dare I say it about the energy crisis. Although how we responded to both of those things are definitely part of this. But I think it's really about international kind of geopolitics being back on the scene after 30 years or so, when we've all become very complacent and just assumed, well, the Cold War's over. And I tell you, the thing that really concerns me is whether our political class as a whole are actually up to the task of this generational upheaval. When you look at some of the technocrats that we've got actually running the country, I won't name names, but I'm sure everybody can...
Of course they're not up to the job. Joanna, we've got leaders... Well, I can give you an example right now. We've got a leader of the opposition that cannot determine whether a woman has a penis. Now, if you want to lead a country and you want to deal with all of the complex, interrelated complexities, international, monetary, economic, and you cannot even answer a simple, basic biology question that a 5-year-old could answer, I would personally say you're not up to the job. So there you go. That's an example.
I've got to come back to Michelle on this because she was tweeting yesterday about why can't Keir Starmer answer a question that a 5-year-old could answer. What he was doing, he should have been clearer. He was trying to be sensitive to people struggling with their identity. But, of course, he needs to sharpen up the message. Rachel Reeves was doing it this morning. The most important characteristics are biology, what you're born with at birth, breast, vagina, whatever. He needs to be clearer. He was trying to be sensitive and kind.
But Starmer can't protect and represent women's interests if he doesn't know what a woman is. And literally, when he talks about women, he doesn't know what he's talking about.
He does know what women is. He's married with 2 kids. Of course he doesn't.
He can't even define it. He can't even define it.
But to be honest, pretending he doesn't know in the interest of sensitivity I actually find that a bit worse. It just comes across as incredibly patronising. So we all know he knows what a woman is. We all know he's married. We all know he's got kids. So the fact is that he goes through this charade of pretending.
But it's the whole political class. Sunak is just as bad.
Exactly.
They save us a lot of time.
But you're the political class. You're not about William.
No, the established political class. That is the problem. There's not actually very much difference on this very issue. Very little difference between them.
But by the way, have we all concluded on this panel then that the future is to be more domestic? Yeah. Have we concluded that?
No.
To be less reliant upon externals in a land of uncertainty?
I'll tell you what, Michelle, we've never needed NATO more than we do now, and international cooperation is going to keep this country safe. So I'd say...
Well, I think the era of globalisation has really been called into question. When you look at, I mean, William was making this point earlier, the amount of cheap stuff we kind of continue to import from China and our reliance on supply chains globally, you know, actually calling that into question, I think is not a bad thing at all.
I think we need to be very, very close to other liberal democratic states like Australia and the States and others. And I think, look at a perfect example of these value divides globally is the international community's reaction to the Russian invasion. No condemnation from China, none from India, no problem from South Africa and Brazil. They continue to trade with them. What we're seeing is the end of sort of Pax Americana, the end of the post-war arrangements which this country helped to put in place. That's breaking down. I think you'll see much more bilateralism, but you need to hug democracies very close.
Yes.
Hug democracies very closely.
Well said.
As part of the speech today, by the way, one of the concerns was about the rise of China. In the next sentence, though, it's all about further and deeper sanctions of Russia. Now, surely most people can understand that an unintended consequence of this is you are going to be pushing Russia deeper into bed with China. And then where will we end up? Let me know your thoughts on all of this, by the way. You can email gbviews at gbnews.uk. You can tweet me at Michelle Dewbs or at GBNews. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk to you about domestic abuse. Priti Patel has launched her plan because over 2 million people experienced domestic abuse just in England and Wales, by the way, last year. So what do we do about this? She's got a few ideas, but will they work? I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry. My panel keeping me company till 7. William Clewson, who's the leader of the Social Democratic Party, Joanna Williams, the author and academic, and Kevin Craig, the Labour councillor and CEO of PLMR. Lots of you have been getting in touch. Madge says, why are we not allowed to invest in digital assets through our pensions? Gotta say, I don't know the answer to that, Madge. We'll try and get you an answer. In fact, actually, I want to do a whole segment on the future of this country. We talk about cashless societies, digital IDs. There's a whole kind of strand there for a future programme. So, Madge, I shall bear your question in mind. Rob says, do you remember all the models that predicted the death rate on the pandemic? The same models are being used for climate change. and the government are making long-term policies on these models. Steve says, Michelle, can you ask the panel how the UK being net zero saves the planet? When our total world contribution is so low, it wouldn't make any noticeable difference. Yeah, I think we emit something like 1% of the emissions, don't we? In China, something like 28. I mean, I'm testing my own memory on the figures here. But yes, I think your point is, Steve, we don't really make that much of an impact. So why are we suffering so much as a result? Kevin is exhaling beside me, I can tell you now. Do you think we should have a referendum, by the way, Kevin, on net zero? I'll ask you that question.
Why not? You might find it a surprise for me to say this. I generally like referendums, Michelle. You know, if you ask people a question, you've got to respect it. Same with Brexit. I didn't like the result, but once you asked the country, you had to implement it. And I think politicians don't often enough defer back to the people.
Well, there you go. What about that? Do you think we should have a net zero referendum? You know, I think if there was one, I don't think it'd go ahead. I'd be fascinated by the outcome. If there was one tomorrow, let's be hypothetical, would you vote to go for it, net zero, or against it?
Depends what the question is, Michelle.
The question would be really simple. Do you think we should achieve net zero by 2030?
No, the question should be, do you want to save the planet and your children's futures?
Oh, God.
That's what you do.
Come off it. There you go. I think my question was much better, and I think people would answer no to that. Kevin, I would say to Kevin, if you're so bothered about saving the planet, why are you advocating 129 billion disposable masks being pumped out into the environment every single month? That's what I'd say. Anyway, around and around we go. Home Secretary Priti Patel has launched a new plan to tackle domestic abuse. Domestic abusers will be placed on a register like sex offenders so that their new partners are informed by police about their violent past. Any convicted abuser will be required by law to tell police if they move house or set up, say, a joint bank account with a new partner. And failure to register or report changes could see abusers facing jail time. According to the national statistics, by the way, over 2 million people are victims of domestic abuse last year alone, just in England and Wales. Got to say, this register is just one aspect of a whole plan of measures, including increased funding to domestic abuse headlines, electronic tagging for perpetrators, something that I think is really important, actually, more investment in teaching of healthy relationships to people and what that actually looks like. Because if you have been a victim of domestic abuse as a child, sometimes it's very hard to know what a healthy relationship looks like. Joanna Williams, you've seen Priti Patel's ideas. Do you think they go far enough in tackling domestic abuse?
I'm not convinced they will work, is one answer to that question. I think the register idea, for example, I mean, it depends upon, even though it's written into law that men could be punished if they don't, I'm saying men, obviously women can be domestic abusers as well as victims of domestic abuse, but it's relying on perpetrators signing up to this register, not, for example, changing their name by deed poll or looking for loopholes to wrangle out of it. But also it depends upon potential victims checking a register at the point at which they get together with a new partner. And I'm just not convinced that that's something that people generally do. If you're in love and you're kind of newly starry-eyed, you don't tend to rush off to a police station to check whether your partner is on a register of domestic abusers, you know, and I worry that it actually puts pressure on, I'm going to say women because it is women who generally are the victims, it puts pressure on women to do that. Men can be too, of course. Well, of course men can be too, but it puts pressure on the victim, if you like, to, well, you know, why did you get yourself in this position? Why didn't you go down and check the abuse register? At the point at which someone is being abused, it tends to be too late. They're trapped, you know, and it's very difficult to then, the register just confirms there was suspicion.
So what are you saying then, no register?
Well, I think there are other ways that we need to look at this problem. I mean, for one thing, you know, rates of domestic abuse, you were quoting the statistics from last year, rates did go up hugely because of lockdown. You know, lockdown essentially trapped people who were in abusive relationships in the home with the perpetrator of that abuse. So I think one thing Priti Patel could have done usefully would be to say we will never, ever put women or vulnerable children, for that matter, in that position ever again. You know, that was a really shocking thing. And again, it was quite clear quite early on that that was likely to be one of the consequences, and yet still lockdown policies continued. You know, before lockdown, though, rates of domestic abuse were actually coming down. And the big thing that's really enabled rates to come down is women's economic freedom. I'm not on about looking year on year here, but actually looking back over a period of of several decades. It's women's increased economic freedom, their capacity to be able to leave a relationship, to be able to get a new house, a new home, to be able to walk away from an abusive relationship that actually gives women, empowers women to be able to leave abusive situations. My biggest worry at the moment is with this cost of living crisis, that in effect is going to trap more people, force people to have to stay with a partner who's abusing them. But the very fact that we've switched the language from talking about domestic violence to domestic abuse, suggests that we are dealing with a slightly different problem than the one we were dealing with a few decades ago.
Well, I mean, in short, Michelle, I think it's important that when a government does something good, that people from all parties should get behind it. And I think I'm really pleased at this plan that Priti Patel has launched. I'm so sick of hearing about men's abuse of and violence against women. And, notwithstanding that the things can always strive towards perfection, as Joanna has inferred, good on the government today for launching this. It's better than doing nothing, and I applaud it.
Whoa, are you feeling all right?
I'm feeling very well. I might need to lie down.
I might need to record that and play it back. Right, William.
I'm going to add to that. I think I read the report. I think it's got a lot to commend it, actually. If they implement everything in this, it certainly will help. As regards a register, I think it would be useful. I think a lot of victims have asked for it as well. And remember, on a lot of occasions, these things start very, very slowly. You get into a relationship and then things start going wrong. And actually, it's at that stage sometimes, if there were a register, you could have a look at it and say, OK, I'm not going to take this any further or whatever. And if it's there, it might help. I think that's very good. There's a lot of good education proposals as well. So I think, I'd get behind it. I'd echo Joanna's point about the lockdowns, though. I think Joanna wrote a good piece. I remember reading, when you have a situation where you deny people's right to get out of a flat, and you say you've got a half-an-hour window, and you're encouraging your fellow citizens to spy and report you. It didn't occur, and Joanna made this point, it didn't occur to a lot of people that the person taking an extra half an hour in the park might need to get out of the house. They might have needed to get out. So all of these things are related. But I think in general, the report itself I'd welcome, and I think it'll probably make a difference.
Yeah, one of the things that I think we really need is more investment in actual refuges. So I see that they're talking here about the National Domestic Helpline, and that's really good. I don't knock that at all. But ultimately, if you're in a domestic abuse situation, you have to be able to flee somewhere, because it's all well and good talking about, registers. And by the way, I do actually agree that you should have these people on the registers. As I said earlier, I'd tattoo the hand or something so you can spot a mile off who these people are. Because if you can do to someone that you're supposed to love, you can do that to someone more often than not in their own home. Then I dread to think what else you're capable of, and I want to know who you are from a million miles away so that I can avoid you. But you need to, once you've worked through that process in your own mind and you've reached the decision to leave, you've got a real kind of window of time there where you've got to capitalise on that decision, capitalise on that momentum, and get that person, the children, whoever it is, out of the house and into safety. And one of the things that I think is such a shame in this society, actually, is that we turn so many people away from refugees, because to muster up that courage and leave and to have nowhere to go, it really...
You've got to have a route. You've got to have roots, and investment in this is very important. As I say, if they do everything, this will help. It's easy to say, well, on a particular point, you might have a different view, but I think it's to be welcomed.
Yeah,
you wouldn't stick a tattoo on them, seriously, though, would you? Would you? Come on.
I won't put anything past me, quite frankly. Have you seen some of the things that these people do to other people? I mean, I've spent a lot of time in and around domestic violence refuges. I will never forget seeing a woman, this is years and years and years ago, and she had one eye. And her other eye had been gouged out by her partner with a screwdriver. Now, I am sorry, but if you are capable of doing that, I want to know who you are so that I can avoid you like the plague.
Well, you need that person to be safely behind bars for a long, long time.
Indeed.
That's the point. I mean, we'll get onto this later.
And, I've got to say as well, we spoke earlier on about Ukraine and things like that. It's been really heartwarming, to see all these people desperately rush to open their homes to people, women and children over in Ukraine that are at risk. There are so many women and children, and by the way, yes, I know it's not just women and children that are victims of this. I know men get abused as well, but predominantly it's women and children. And there are so many women and children that could do with a safe space, a safe haven, just getting away from their lives. And I wish that lots of the people that have kind of been galvanised and motivated now to open up their homes and their space would perhaps be open-minded about opening their homes and their space up to people in this country that need help and support.
But it's the problem with that is that what gets done often is what is on the news. And this, and actually, just to broaden it, in terms of violence against women and girls, a national scandal in Rotherham, the J report, 2014, it's still happening. And you speak to people in Rotherham and
what we're on about now, the grooming.
Yeah, grooming gangs, and because, basically very little was done and then too late. And it depends, it's all about what gets attention, who is backing action. But,
but it's also about who gets listened to and who gets believed. And it always happens that some people's voices are heard kind of louder than others. Some victims even are deemed more worthy of national attention than others. But I think this point you're making about a safe space is absolutely crucial. And again, sorry to kind of bring this back to the same issue we were talking earlier, but I do think for women in particular who are escaping a situation of domestic violence, they do need the guarantee of safety that they're going to be in a single-sex space only alongside other women. And I think this is one area in particular where there are real dangers of gender self-identification. If you go into a domestic refuge, you need to know that you're not going to be bumping into a man, when you go to the loo or go to the shower.
With all due respect, right, that is a brilliant segue you've just done there, because this horrific issue of violence and abuse against women is not really linked to the gender identification stuff, because it's actually just there are too many men, right, committing violence and abuse, and we might come back to that. But the point is, it's a good point about refugees, Michelle. There's a tragedy in this country. We've got so many empty properties. We had them already, so many. I mean, it's just immoral.
We've also got a housing crisis.
Yeah, but I do just want to pick up on your point, by the way, because safe spaces for vulnerable women are something that has really been quite hard fought for. And I personally believe the protection of those spaces should be equally hard fought for. I think it's essential that vulnerable women have a place that they can go, that they feel safe. By the way, we ran a poll, it's running actually as we speak, on our Twitter account asking you, do you think there should be a register for domestic abusers? Almost 80% of you so far say yes, you sensible people. Going to take a quick break. And by the way, I just want to add, because some of you watching this tonight might actually be in a situation where you're being domestically abused. You might be a man, you might be a woman. I just want to say to you, there can be a different future. My own background, I speak about it very freely. Domestic abuse is complicated, and getting out of that situation takes great courage, but it can be done, and there can be an entirely different, safe life awaiting you. But you have to take that first step, and there are helplines and things like that. You can find them on Google. So if you're in that situation, I would implore you to get some help if you feel able. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk to you about whether or not teenagers should be in young offenders institutes, or is what they really need some love, care and attention. I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Coming up on Dan Wootton Tonight, social media activist Zuby, political firebrand Anne Widdecombe and GBNews star Mark Dolan are all on hand to give me their uncensored takes on the headlines of the day. And I'll break down the top stories with my superstar panel, the Conservative commentator Dominique Samuels, the former Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and the author and journalist Amy Nicol. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry. Lots of you, by the way, getting in contact about that last topic. And a theme that's really coming through loudly is so many of you are pointing out that men are the victim of domestic abuse as well. I hope I did manage to land that point because I completely agree with you. I mean, some of you are sending through statistics, and I've got to say, I'm surprised it's kind of as high as some of you are suggesting. And it's really concerning that that is the case. Mel, for example, has written in and said, my son was beat repeatedly. His face was pretty much ripped apart by his partner's nails and her teeth. Would he be able to get help with getting hair on the register? Well, Mel, what I say is if you're a domestic abuser, I don't care what gender you are, if you hurt the person that you're supposed to love, you've got a problem. And I absolutely think that you should be on that register, whatever your gender or your sex is. But yet, lots of you getting in touch saying that you have yourself witnessed domestic abuse whilst you were a child, or indeed a male, you're now an adult and you're saying you've experienced it as well. It's just awful. Like I said, I do believe that domestic abuse is a cancer on society and we've got to try and root it out. And I think a big key part of that is relationship training, teaching, guidance, I don't know what you call it, because when you're a child and you see that cycle, you don't know what a healthy relationship looks like. So then when you start kind of orientating yourself into relationships, you repeat bad examples sometimes, which is not good. Right, let's move on, shall we? Over in Scotland, they're proposing to get rid of jail time for those aged 16 and 17. What do you think to this? My panel, by the way, in case you're just tuning in and wondering who it is that's joining me, William Clouston, who's the leader of the Social Democratic Party, Joanna Williams, the author and academic, and Kevin Craig, who's the Labour councillor and CEO of PLMR. Now, this topic then, this Scottish justice system topic, this is quite a key reform actually, because it's looking at children who commit criminal offences wouldn't be sent to Young Offenders Institute. In Scotland, ministers unveiled the proposals to end the custody of 16 and 17-year-olds in favour of what they call care-based alternatives. Ministers say the change will shift the approach from one of punishment to one of love and support. I'll start with you, I think, on this one, Kevin. What's your thoughts on this?
Well, Michelle, at first read, this story is very worrying because I'm a very victim-first kind of person when it comes to law and order. I'm more worried about victims. I'm more worried about police officers who put their lives on the line than I am about criminals, in speech marks. I did wonder, though, you know, if this has been brought forward by experts, will it ultimately, and I think all of us, I'm guessing on this panel, will get wound up, most of all you, when you see an announcement that talks about...
I don't know what you mean.
Well, listen to this, right? When you see the announcement talks about, you know, 16, 17-year-olds convicted of serious crimes, sometimes murder, and their human rights being breached, well, immediately we'll all go, hang on a minute, what about the rights of their victims? So I really feel that, but I'm wondering, is there anything in that where this has been looked at and they're trying to ultimately get the best outcomes for society? Are they trying to as well as punish people, reform them? I'm just asking the question.
Well, if I can jump in there. Yeah. Sorry, because I think this is a story where language is so important yet again, because if we talk about children going to prison, for me, that personally, I kind of think, oh, no, that's wrong. You know, why would you have children in a prison? But when you're talking about someone who's 17 in a young offenders institution, it changes your whole perception of this story. And I think, you know, if there are problems with young offenders institutions, then we need to make them better. You know, they need to have a focus on education and on rehabilitation. But that's the problem. They don't need more love. You know, they don't need to put children in homes where they're just going to be hugged. They need proper education, proper rehabilitation, and some of them will need locking up for the protection of other people in society. That's a sad fact of life. One other thing I'd just add to this, though, is I think, you know, for some reason the SNP seem to be so confused about what actually is a child and what actually is an adult. So
I think the SNP is confused about a lot.
Oh, well, yeah,
things,
but if I'm right, you know, they want 16-year-olds to be able to vote. They think 4-year-olds should be able to choose their own gender in school, but they don't think 16 and 17-year-olds should go to prison, even for, or a young offenders institution, even for having committed a murder. I mean, to me, those things just don't compute. You know, either 16, 17-year-olds are able to make decisions like who should run the country, in which case they can take responsibility if they've committed a crime, or they think 16, 17-year-olds are children, in which case they should not be able to vote in elections.
William?
Should 16 or 17-year-olds be locked up? I think the answer to the question depends on what they've done, and depends to what extent they're a danger to society. There are many people in that category who would be a danger to society. I think I'm not impressed at all by this drift towards disparaging the merits of incarceration. Incarceration works. Prison works. A lot of people are put in prison because they are a danger to society, and that's exactly where they should be. This is something we knew yesterday that we're sort of inclined to sort of forget. Kevin says some experts may have said, well, let's not lock these tearaways up. Well, they might say that, but that sort of, when I read this report, I was thinking, it reminded me of the old joke about the two sociologists walking down the road and they see someone bloodied and battered in the gutter, and one sociologist says to the other, we must find the person that did this and help them. Well, and on they walk, you know, and this is the problem.
Do you know, you said a second ago that you thought there'd be, like, kind of no one more outraged at some of this stuff than me. When I read this, I was immediately catapulted. I'm old enough to remember Jamie Bulger, the murder of Jamie Bulger.
Absolutely, yes.
And, you know, more so, actually, I think about that more so now, because I've got a little boy around about the same age as what Jamie Bulger was. And we'll all remember, well, if you remember the story, you'll remember, of course, the two people that did that were very young children. And a lot of society was quite divided about, you know, how do you punish these children? My reaction is you get them locked away. You never let those people out because that is beyond the realms of evil. So I kind of come at it from that perspective, right? But then when I think about this story, these reforms are part of something called the Promise. And the Promise is all about looking at the lives of people in the care system in Scotland. So then I think if you're a child that's in care, so you're not from, like many people watching this, they've come from normal homes, for want of a better word. If you're, I don't know, the child of a heroin addict, that's all you've ever known is abuse, you're shoved into the care system, you don't know what being normal and right and proper is, so you're on the wrong path from day one. Obviously, I'm not suggesting, by the way, that when it comes to things like the Jamie Bulger murderers, etc., this excuses them, because it doesn't. I've just explained what I do with those two. But I'm talking about if someone's just on the wrong side of the tracks, it does make me soften a little bit, Kevin, because I think that these because, you know, when you're 16, like yesterday, someone on the panel, by the way, a fellow Labour councillor, she was telling me that Baby P's mum should be almost excused because she was from a chaotic lifestyle. You know, that doesn't wash with me. She's a grown adult, thank you. But when we're talking about children, there is a little part of me, the soft part of me, that I don't want any child to be in care in this country, you know. I want all children to be loved and nurtured.
And that's where I'm coming from, you know. No sort of compromise on victims' rights and law and order and our police, but this point that you've picked up on, you know, in terms of what makes us good people, where do we learn our behaviours, and so I think it's not as black and white. Although aspects of this announcement will outrage others. You know, William, it's a good question. You said prison works. You know, I sometimes fear, and I can't say it enough, you know, I can't bear when people suffer from the actions of others. But in terms of scientifically, is prison working and turning people around? I think that's a life question.
Well, it doesn't. Well, on the data, it doesn't. Criminals rehabilitate themselves because they get to 40 and they stop. That's what the data said. They stop. They basically stop committing crime. But if you speak to sergeants, if you speak to police in towns, there are towns where tearaways 15 younger are responsible for a vast majority of the crime in the town, and they know who they are. And the idea that you can protect society by not locking them up, I just don't agree with.
Well, Liam has emailed in and says, Michelle, I was a policeman for 13 years, and I can tell you now that some 16 to 17-year-olds could be serious criminals, and they would laugh at a society that wouldn't lock them up no matter what they do. So, I mean, that's Liam's kind of day job.
But there's prison and prison, isn't there? And, I mean, I think there's a huge difference between putting a 17-year-old in a cell on their own, turning the key and leaving them on their own for 23 and a half hours a day, which, again, you know, at risk of sounding like I'm just banging the same drum, was what happened a lot during lockdown. You know, that was the experience for many young offenders during lockdown. Isolation, 23 and a half hours a day. There's a huge difference between that and being in a prison that does have a focus on training, on education, on rehabilitation. And I think, you know, when you're talking about young offenders institutions, that should be the focus. You know, I would hate to write any 17-year-old off as being beyond rehabilitation at that age.
No matter what they've done?
Ideally, yes. I think, you know, you should hold out, because if you say to a 16, 17-year-old, you know, you're completely beyond rehabilitation, what's the point to the rest of that person's life?
But you see,
it might be a long process.
Those kids that murdered Jamie Bulger, for me, when you look at the details of what they did to that little boy, I don't think there should ever be any redemption for people like that.
But you can be in a town like Middlesbrough, you can stab someone, and that can be GBH. And you can. I don't think this is taken seriously enough. You've got to have a victim-focused approach, and you've got to protect society.
David says, in Scotland, we now have to hug people then who commit violent crimes under the age of 18. What does that mean? That young people who commit rape and murder aren't given a custodial sentence? He says Scotland is very quickly going to turn into a lawless society. He says the people of Scotland must vote the SNP out. Ray says young offenders have to learn to take responsibility for their actions and that there are consequences. Stuart says, Boris, please come and save us in Scotland.
What's he going to do? He's about to get nicked himself, isn't he?
Yes, he might.
What's he going to teach anybody?
Well, I'm astonished it's only taken you 53 minutes to bring that again up.
That's a fair point.
Mention Boris, you know.
That's a fair point.
You know, I don't think he's the person that we should listen to on Law and Order. It's the same guy who got recorded threatening to duff up a journalist.
Tough on causes of crime.
Yeah.
Well, Tony says, don't judge criminals by their age, judge them by the crime they've committed and then act accordingly. Their age doesn't affect the victim. That's exactly the kind of point we're trying to make here, Tony, that it is all about, you know, what have you done? What is the impact on the victims? Sharon, on the net zero thing, says, Michelle, the only way to have net zero is to have zero people. You know, careful what you wish for, because you know, at this rate, we'll all be getting taken over by robots in the not-too-distant future, I can tell you. Lots of you writing in, many of you remember, of course, the situation about Jamie Bulger. Kevin, let's have a look at what you're saying, Kevin. Well, I have to say lots of you are writing in saying, Kevin said, the two boys who killed Jamie Bulger were just very damaged children themselves. How could normal children have ever have committed these types of crime? It's easy to condemn them now that they're grown men, but they were clearly damaged kids themselves. Kevin, I don't know how much of the details of that case that you've read. I mean, I read a lot. There's damaged, and then there's, you know, something seriously not quite right. And lest we forget, by the way, that when this, at least one of these people came out and was involved in, I think it was child porn again, and back they went. These two people, by the way, have been granted a life of anonymity. I mean, can you imagine someone doing that to your child, your child gone, and then the perpetrators get to be anonymous, start their lives all over again? No thanks. Anyway, that's pretty much all we've got time for. Joanna, Kevin, William, thank you. We didn't even get time to talk about Disney. Joanna was desperate to talk about that one. They want to make sure that 50% of their characters are LGBTQIA+, and from other minorities as well. I think I've added enough letters on there. Right, we'll save that one for another day. Have yourself a fantastic evening, and I will see you tomorrow.
Hello, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Going to be cold overnight. A frosty start for many of us on Friday. A dry, bright day, but a definite chill in the air, and there will still be some wintry showers around. High pressure is close by, but around this high, the winds are coming in from the north. That is why it is so chilly out there today and why it'll be frosty overnight. And we'll keep a few wintry showers, parts of Kent, the east of East Anglia and northeast England, eastern Scotland. Seeing some showers coming in with temperatures dropping. That could lead to some icy conditions as well as not being very pleasant to drive through those snow showers. Further west, many places just dry and clear, but it will be cold. In rural spots, maybe -5 in Wales, Northern Ireland, maybe as low as -8 where there's snow lying on the ground in Scotland. There is a chance of seeing the aurora tonight in parts of Scotland in particular. Tomorrow then, it's dry and bright for many, but we'll continue with some wintry showers over northeast England, southeast Scotland and parts of Kent and East Anglia as well. And later on, we'll see some wet weather coming into western Scotland with snow on the hills. Otherwise, a lot of dry, sunny weather, but still cold. Not as cold as today. Still a noticeable breeze, but it won't be quite so icy as today's wind. Through Friday evening, wet weather will spread across Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland, into North Wales and northwest England, with some snow still on the hills here. At low levels, it should be mostly rain, and that'll push during Saturday morning into South Wales and southwest England, again with some sleet and snow, especially over the hills. Petering out through the day, 1 or 2 showers in the east, but many of us on Saturday, again dry and bright, just nothing like as warm as it was last weekend, with temperatures, again, generally only in single figures, maybe up to 10 across parts of the south. At least by Saturday, though, the winds will be an awful lot lighter. So the weekend will be chilly, with many places dry and bright, but still a few wintry showers here and there.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.